Today I am ruining your childhood. I've taken 3 of your beloved classic kids films and reimagined them as chilling horror posters. Starting with Luca, a charming tale of friendship, scooters, and sea monsters. But what if your sea monsters weren't quite as friendly? Let's dive in. Starting off with this image of Luca. It's a little on the small side, so I hit it with a quick generative fill and boom, much better. After that, I made a selection of the water so I could swap it out with a much darker, scary image of my own. Then we're just going to clip this into our selection and a little bit more generative fill to smooth things out.
Nice.
The water surface needed a bit of colour matching, so I tweaked it using a hue adjustment tool. Then let's throw in a moody sky and pull the exposure down just to set the tone a little. Alright, now let's make little Luca here a bloodthirsty sea monster. I think this friendly looking set of teeth might do the trick quite nicely. The eyebrows were a little too cheerful for his new role, so I made a copy, blended them in with the eraser, and now we've got a much less friendly looking Luca. I then found this fancy dressed monster mask image which had the perfect nose for our sea monster, so I blended the selection to just sit under the water surface. Now I did notice the sea was starting to lose a little bit of definition, so I brought in this wave overlay, warped, colour matched, and blended it in to sit more naturally with the rest of the ocean. Right, now trust the process on this bit, yeah? I needed a body, okay?
Okay.
Now in hindsight, could I have chosen one which wasn't a half-naked man? Yes. Now for this godsend of a tool, the puppet warp. We're just shifting this bloke's bulging biceps to be aligned with Luca. Next up, I created a sea monster texture overlay, clipped it into place, and we're ready to start shading. This is the part where the image really starts coming to life, adding shadows across Luca's body to give everything more depth and just that 3D feel. Now, what's a sea monster without fishy, spiky gill things, right? I then matched everything up with this murky green color. I wanted to show that warm sunset glow hitting Luca's face, so I added some highlights and then gave them this golden orange tint. And of course we needed just a little splash of blood, just something to hint that he's maybe been on a bit of some bloodthirsty crawl for some poor unsuspecting fisherman. I also added a few more shadows cast by his hair and the waves to really set him into the scene. Now I thought the background was looking a little empty, so I built out this island silhouette using a low exposure and a subtle Gaussian blur to push it into the distance. I also blended in a crashing wave surface against a pier for a bit more drama. Then using these small glowing orange window shapes, I gave the island a sense of life, like it's inhabited, and even reflected some of that warm glow into the sea to tie it all together. Now, just for some finishing title elements, and our Luca horror poster is complete. Well, I would say it's quite the transformation. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. One thing's for sure though, I would not be going for a swim in that sea. Next up, Ratatouille. Normally it's a lovely heartfelt story of a rat helping a chef find his passion. But what if the chef wasn't quite in control? Let's start by separating these characters from the background and bringing in some good old generative fill to give these eyes a much creepier look.
Hey yo, what the?
This cheesy grin also had to go, as I wanted Linguini's mouth to be stitched shut, as if Remy now has complete control of him. Followed by these earphones, which block out the outside interference that could mess with Remy's mind control. I decided to crop out Linguini's body and replace it with this pose, which I just thought was screaming to be used in some sort of horror concept. However, to make it work, I had to get a little bit messy, positioning different body parts together and using a generative fill to patch in the gaps. And to my surprise, it actually worked really well. I thought this process shows just how handy AI can be when it's actually used correctly as a tool. I also added these puppet strings to make it clear that Linguini's awkward hand position is because he's being fully controlled, also reinforcing that he's a prisoner to Remy. With the base concept complete, I jumped into the shading. I sectioned off various parts of Linguini's uniform and created 3D folds within the clothing. I think this worked really well given how many loose folds there were in parts like his sleeves. Of course, the shading had to be applied to his face, and I also replaced the eyelids with some more generative fill. Then straight into the camera raw filter where we can really set the tone with a complementary colour palette. Where is Remy in the poster, you ask? Well, he's of course under his hat, which I created a silhouette shadow as if the light is being cast from behind. For the title, I went with this really cool font from Envato Elements, affiliate link in the description, and added a lovely horror texture just above. And for the finishing touches, we absolutely had to just smother Linguini in a whole lot of red splatters. Definitely a little darker than the original. I really like the type treatment on this one with that contrasting orange colour palette against the blue. However, I would maybe skip your next reservation at Gustavo's. And finally, we have everyone's favourite beloved Disney film, Toy Story. Let's ruin it. Now, once I saw this image of Woody hiding behind the wall, I just knew I had to do something with it. My first idea was to turn Sid into some demonic figure hunting down Woody and the gang. And for a little bit of sinister storytelling, I did a few horrific markings smeared onto the wall above Woody. Then it was time to build up some shadows to make him feel more grounded and lifelike. I also went in with the burn tool to roughen him up a little bit, like he's been through hell trying to escape Sid's twisted experiments. Once I dropped him into the camera raw filter, that gritty cinematic look really kicked in. But I decided the Sid concept wasn't quite working. So I pivoted. I ditched the Sid idea for a blurred psycho silhouette instead. However, there was just no space to cast it. So, with a little help from generative fill, I extended the wall, giving myself a clean surface to throw that shadow onto. Of course, a little bit of blur to make it more shadow-like, a subtle splash of blood here and there, and just like that, we're done. Quite the trial and error on this one, however I think the final design came out quite nicely. Let me know in the comments which one was your favourite. The sea monster saga of Luca and his bloodthirsty taste for fishermen, Ratatouille with Linguini as the mindless puppet, or Toy Story and Woody's sinister escape from a deranged intruder. And if you enjoyed this twisted trip down memory lane, check out my previous video where I turned classic kids' toys into terrifying horror movie posters. Now what's a sea monster without spishy... Spishy. Spishy. That's fun. I like that. Now, what is a sea monster without spishy? I said it again. Now, what's a sea monster without spishy?